Welcome to Trends with Benefits, an award-winning podcast by Van Eck with a forward-looking perspective. We explore new ways of thinking about the markets, work, and life. Here's your host, Ed Lopez.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Ed.
Where are you based? Are you here in New York?
Denver.
Oh, in Denver. That's right. How long have you lived there?
We moved here April 2020, so 3 years this week, actually.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's a
Yeah.
hot area. And I mean, like a growing area.
I mean, our little block here, we have 2 demo rebuilds on our block on our street, and kind of every block going up, there's at least one on every block.
Yeah. I mean, how's the traffic?
Well, I've lived in DC, and so anything is better than DC.
Fair point. Fair point. I guess at least if you're stuck in traffic, you can just look to the horizon, look at the mountains.
See the mountains. Yeah, they're pretty much there all the time. So yeah.
Welcome to another episode of Trends with Benefits. Today, I'm speaking with Lisa Crafford. She is Director, Head of Business Consulting at BNY Mellon Pershing. And the topic du jour is financial literacy. Lisa, welcome.
Ed, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
When I was thinking about this episode and I started thinking about financial literacy, but I feel like it's a topic that in more recent years has come up more and more and more. And I was actually kind of quite surprised. I did a quick Google search to see when Financial Literacy Month was actually started. It looked like, according to Google, the United States Senate passed a resolution in 2003 officially designating April as Financial Literacy Month. And it's like, wow, all right, already 20 years. But I feel like it's in more recent periods, it's become more of a topic for us in the financial industry. And I'm just kind of curious as to why. Like, why now versus like in any other period that I remember, even just growing up? What is it about the period that we're in now, do you think, that financial literacy is important?
Yeah, I feel like there's certainly been a momentum shift in talking about, hearing about, seeing about financial literacy and people being pretty active in that space where 10, 15 years ago, even though Financial Literacy Month was a thing, I don't know that I had ever heard of it before. I think it's kind of one of those social proofs that when you start hearing other people talk about it, you start talking about it a little bit more. It's like, when you buy that new car and then you see that car everywhere on the road, it's a little bit of that. But I think also it's just come from a real recognition that this is a problem for children and families in our country and beyond. And particularly in the world that we live in with advisors and active people who like investing and like talking about investments, realize that they have an opportunity to make a difference. So perhaps that's why we're starting to see a little bit more of a pickup.
When I started my career, I started in financial planning for a very brief time, but I started there. But still, you talk to people, you tell them you're in investments or finance or whatever, and they don't know what a stock is, or they couldn't really explain it, or they don't know what a mutual fund is sometimes. And I find that I have to do that education. In fact, when I talk about ETFs, that's where the last 20 years I've spent my times in ETFs. I finally got to a point where I can say it's like a mutual fund in your 401k, and they kind of get it. But it trades on an exchange. But there's still a real lack of understanding of some certain topics. And I don't know what, and that's just on the investment side. But financial literacy, what is the scope of that? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the answer really depends on the audience that you're talking to, because financial literacy could mean, do you know that you're supposed to spend less than you make? And it could be, do you know what an alternative investment is and how to use it in your portfolio? And there's kind of this enormous spectrum of topics that fall under it. We've done work with kids in kindergarten through high school, into college, into new graduates. And there's this level of basic understanding of what might seem like really common sense things, like the difference between a checking account, a savings account, or a debit card and a credit card. And then there might be more complicated things like, should you buy or lease a car? Should you rent or get a mortgage? And so all of those things fall under financial literacy. And I think that's maybe what makes this topic so hard, is that there isn't just this very simple playbook of learn these 10 things and you'll be set. Once you've learned the first 10 things, there's another 10 million things that you could learn and keep going on. So there's a lot in there.
No, you're right. And as you were talking, that your last point is exactly what I was thinking about, which is even if you learn some of the basics as time goes on, rules change, your wealth changes, there's different things to learn, relearn, or do differently. I think it's good for everybody to somehow stay on top of what can help them financially.
Yeah, and depending on what your particular situation is too, one solution might be right for you and it might be wrong for somebody else. And so you can't speak in general terms on financial literacy because you really have to take in everybody's individual considerations before you know what the right thing is for that person to do.
I remember during our prep call, you just came off so passionate about this topic, which is amazing. What drew you to this as to being an advocate for financial literacy?
Yeah, so I feel like I grew up in a pretty great situation where I had two working parents and we had a home and there was safety and security. And, I never really had to worry about where my next meal was coming from. You know, that might be unusual for a lot of people, but I was really lucky to have that. I moved to the United States in 2007. Interesting time to be starting a career and starting a life in a totally different country. And even though we speak the same language, there's a lot of cultural differences between the States and Australia. I started getting involved in some local community work. And then once we had children and they were going to school, I noticed and was kind of shocked actually at how much the local state government schools were providing to children beyond education. And I realized that there's a lot missing for kids. There's not that safety and security necessarily. And one of those things was the financial literacy piece. And every school was trying to do it a little bit differently. And I realized that there was just a huge gap there's a lot of people who have the resources and there's a lot of people who need the resources and they're not meeting in the middle. And the schools were trying to fill that gap, but they weren't necessarily resourced on that. And so watching my kids come through and knowing that they're going to be better off than I was, I'm certainly trying to teach them more than I knew them at their age. But that's really where my passion started, and why I feel like, we have a great platform to be able to encourage others to do similar work in their own communities.
In terms of talking about the communities that you were working in, I'm going to go back to one of my first questions, which I wonder, in this environment that we find ourselves in with a rising disparity in wealth between people, if this is one reason why financial literacy keeps coming up too, in terms of helping people get ahead. The need to do so is even greater now with these big gaps in wealth between different classes of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sorry. What was the question there, Ed?
That's a good point. It wasn't really a question; it was more of a comment. But it was just, it was just like,
Oh, good. Okay.
maybe it's what your thoughts are again on where we find ourselves today. Other reasons why it's important financial literacy to help perhaps address some of the other issues that we're dealing with as a society.
Yeah. So, one of the interesting things is we think about the impact of COVID on financial literacy, and it might seem like, a little bit out there, but there was a period for 2 years that my children did not go to a grocery store. Frankly, I really didn't like taking them to the grocery store normally because it was like, I want this and I want that and I want this and I want that. And for a long time, my family was on a pretty tight budget. We didn't eat out. It was a question of, do we do this activity or do we put gas in the car? I mean, I've never lived my whole life in this very comfortable financial state, but taking my kids to the grocery store was a risk sometimes because it wasn't necessarily, extra money to buy extra things for them. But then there's this period of a couple of years over COVID where kids didn't go to the grocery store. They don't know what toilet paper costs or what milk costs or what eggs cost now. I mean, eggs is the toilet paper of 2023. So, there's not an understanding of what it costs to live. And so when a kid says, hey, I want this new phone, and you say, well, that's $1,000, are they able to then relate that to, well, that's a month's worth of groceries, right? Is that phone worth a month's worth? Because they're not seeing those prices. Or perhaps, I see a lot of our neighbors here in Denver get their groceries delivered, which is a fantastic service and certainly, a great invention of the COVID era. But if we're not seeing those prices, if cash isn't being passed over, how are the kids going to learn what things cost and what the value is. It's similar story as you go to the store and you swipe your credit card and you swipe your credit card. My kids, when they were much younger, used to be like, well, just put it on your credit card. It's like, there's not an unlimited amount of funds in this pot of money, but they don't see that and they don't know that. And so, there's this need for constant education around that, not just on how much things cost, but about making wise financial decisions in the moment. And do we need this thing or do we want this thing? And I just feel like there's just a lot of opportunities, regardless of your financial literacy level or your age or where you live. There's always stuff that we could be learning and helping other people understand as well.
How do you address that with your kids, or how do you help them understand that now? I mean, do you, obviously maybe you give them an allowance or tell them to get a job
Yeah.
or charge them rent for their room? I don't know, like how do you make that connection?
Yeah. So, we talk a lot about money in our house. I mean, obviously the kids know what I do, and my husband's an entrepreneur. And so we have some pretty interesting conversations. We've got someone in very, very corporate America and someone who's, running their own business. And so there's a lot of differences in, how money works in our family, but we talk a lot about it. My kids don't get an allowance. They have responsibilities and jobs that they have to do. Right now, they're doing them downstairs. It's spring break, so it's good to be able to put them to work. But we don't want to pay them for doing what we think that they should be responsible for doing. We want them to leave the house as adults and not expect to be paid to load the dishwasher. But everyone's family is different, and there's no judgment on people who do allowances. But what we do for our children is we have a trust account for them. And on their birthday, starting at age 10, after they've kind of grown out of getting all the toys and we don't want to have any more toys in our house, they get money for their birthday that corresponds with the year of their birthday. So the money goes up a little bit over the years, and every dollar of their own money that they put into their trust account before they're 18, we will match dollar for dollar. We encourage them to be entrepreneurial. About 80% of our block here in Denver employs them on some level for cat sitting, package pickup, whatever it might be, snow shoveling, leaf raking in the spring, and they're responsible for earning their own money. But we buy kind of the normal things for them. But we want to teach them what things cost, and when we go to the store, it's not an IOU situation. They have to bring their cash with them. And they have to hand that over to the person. They have to pay the tax, and they have to understand what that feels like to see the money in their wallet go away. And I think that that's a really important visual lesson for them to learn as they want things and want to buy things for themselves.
Absolutely. That's really inventive. I like that approach.
Well, we'll see when they're only 11 and 13. So, we'll check back in 10 years and see if it worked. But it's been fun. Like, there are two very different personalities. I've got one who's a super saver, doesn't want to buy anything, and then one who wants every shiny object that he sees out there. And so the conversations even are just different. We want our super saver to spend money. We want him to be able to enjoy the money that he has saved and put aside and has, that he doesn't necessarily need to put away in his trust account. And so trying to encourage him to value something enough to give over the money for it. Whereas the other one, it's a completely opposite conversation of, hey, you know what? Maybe we don't need this squeaky toy, right? Like, we've got 27 of those already downstairs. And trying to help him see what the impact of saving that money might be. Everyone has kind of a different wiring on that stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I guess so. A lot of what you're talking about is budgeting, understanding the budgeting concept and spending, saving for the future. One of the powerful principles that I keep thinking about too, in terms of saving, is the principle of compound return, and the power that has over time. So, which I think is what you're doing, the trust thing that you're working with your kids, and by the time they're 18 or whatever, hopefully that compound return will have kicked in, and they'll have a nice little nest egg to play with there.
Yeah, I mean, it looks good right now, even with the markets the way that they've been. I mean, it's fun to log in and look at that with them and explain to them that, and I'm just pulling out a number, but you had $1,000 and now you have $800 and maybe next week you'll have $1,200. You just, and so things, how that changes and how the markets impact that, but they can't touch it till they're 21. So hopefully they have more than $1,000 left in there by the time they're 21.
And since you mentioned kind of market volatility, do you think market conditions affect people's approach to financial literacy? Whether it's teaching themselves about it or totally ignoring it, somebody that's lived through a recession, maybe their approach to their finances might be different than somebody else. Anna, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I think people are going to go both ways on that. I think folks who've lived through a recession, perhaps they've lost a job or lost their house or whatever it is, and had some major lifestyle disruption, are going to respond with something. It's a very emotional thing when you find yourself in that position. And I've talked to and worked with a number of low-income families and low-income individuals, where maybe there isn't that money to set aside at the end of the month, because you just got to make do with what you have in that moment. And so, you see people come out of that with like, I never want to be like this again. And what can I do with the little that I have to make sure that that doesn't happen again? And then you see those who say, I'm going to live in the moment, because you just never know what's going to happen. I think teaching those like live in the moment people to help pull it back a little bit is really important. But, we all respond, and there's a very deep emotional connection that everybody has with money, right? And a lot of people don't even realize what that is. They haven't done the story work to look back in their family of origin or their growing up story to think about what was their first memory of money. Was it a scarcity thing? Was it someone gave them something? Like that. Everybody has that kind of story, and if you don't really know or understand how your psyche works on that, then it's hard to see kind of what what the future response is going to be. But I really encourage people, when we're doing financial literacy work, for them to go back and think about what that first memory of money was for them.
That's really interesting. I'm not exactly sure what my first memory was, but my first thought as you were talking was putting my head down on my pillow and waking up in the morning and find a quarter in there.
There you go.
The tooth
Yeah.
fairy. So I don't know what
Yeah.
that's done to me or my psyche about it, but I don't know.
Yeah, money
Yeah,
disappears,
it just
right? Like,
appears.
mom and dad just always have enough money to buy things, and until maybe one day they don't, right? There's something in there, and there's some emotional reaction that's generally untapped in people, that explains a lot about how we as adults and as parents and as employers and as workers respond to the money that's in our life.
There's a lawmaker in Louisiana I was just reading about that's trying to pass through legislation where high school kids have to pass a financial literacy test in order to graduate. Do you think we need more of that?
Oh yeah, we do. And actually there's an infographic out there where it shows the states in which financial literacy coursework is mandatory, and it's like 5 states. It's really, really small. And then when you look deeper into what that law actually means, and what the what it means to be able to check the box and say yes, had financial literacy, it's something like 4 hours of coursework. I don't know about you, but my kids need a little bit more than 4 hours over an entire school year to really learn and understand and absorb a concept. And so, again, it's a good start. We need more. I think, every year around tax time, we start seeing these memes around like, I'm so glad I learned trigonometry and not how to do my taxes. And it's a joke, but it's not a joke, right? Like, why can't we use schools as a vehicle to deliver and teach this information and prepare students? They're a captive audience. Children in America still have to go to school, whether they're homeschooled in private school, public school, whatever the situation is. We know that they're captive in a school environment, and that information is not being dispersed.
And hopefully, and we'd assume it's trusted information. And because the next question I have for you, and you mentioned technology, I wonder what your thoughts are about like TikToks or the TikToks of the world. Especially over the last few years, I have my own thoughts about it, but it was interesting how many people were communicating via these short videos. And I thought, well, maybe that's an interesting way of learning different concepts.
Yeah, so I'm not cool enough to have TikTok, but what I will say is we did a virtual volunteering day with this inner city school here in Denver, a middle school. And one of the exercises we did with them was for every letter of the alphabet, for them to give us a career or a job that started with that letter of the alphabet. We're getting down to the bottom of the alphabet and Y comes up. And I'm like, oh gosh, this is going to be interesting. Like, where are we going to go with this? And one kid immediately says, YouTuber. And, again, not that cool. I was like, wow, like my kids' friends and peer group are thinking about YouTube as a career, right? TikTok as a career. You hear about these folks who are making millions of dollars on TikTok, right? And it just, again, I feel really old. I'm like, it just seems kind of crazy to me. But here's the great thing. It's really accessible. I don't know a lot of kids that don't have a smartphone. Even kids from lower income families have smartphones because it gives them access to the city. It, without a phone, I'm not letting my kids ride their bikes up to the rec center by themselves, right? And so a lot of kids have smartphones, and there are low cost plans that give them access to that. If they don't have a smartphone, in Denver and in Colorado, every kid in COVID got a Chromebook. So that they could send all the kids home and do school virtually. So every kid has at least a laptop that's provided by the school. And if you didn't have internet in your home, then the state provided internet for you so that you could do school from home. So I feel like that technology is a nice vehicle to get people interested. My fear is, though, there's just a lot of bad actors out there. And like I said earlier, and a piece of advice I might give you, Ed, might be totally different from something I'd give my 25-year-old neighbor. Just because of where you are in life and your current financial situation and what your goals are, or whatever it might be. And so I think it's hard when you see you must do this, or you must, save this much, or do this, or buy that, or whatever online. It's like, that might be great for somebody else, but it might not be right for you. And I don't think people necessarily have the discernment to understand the difference.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that question in terms of the TikTokers or the finfluencers out there that have gotten a lot of attention. And it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
who are these people for
Yeah.
one? And maybe what they're saying is okay or accurate, but not all of them. And I like the approach of teaching it in school better.
Yeah. And there's some great, I like the finfluences. That's cool. I haven't heard that before. There's Matt Gardner is doing an amazing job with the Four Money Bears. And there's a lot of people who are out there with really good information. And it's, generally speaking, it's not you should do this or you should do that, but it's just teaching the basis and the education rather than telling people what they should go and do. And I think that's kind of where Pershing has an interesting spot, is that we have access to so many advisors, and advisors know the answers to these basic questions. One of the initiatives that we've had at Pershing is to create lessons. So we have lessons for every grade from kindergarten through 12th grade, and it's a playbook. So all you have to do is it's not a piece of paper because it's all digital, but get the PDF or whatever. We've got resources linked, YouTube's, whatever you need linked to the thing. And an advisor can walk into a classroom and deliver the lesson. We don't need you to write the lesson. We just need you to deliver it and to use your common sense and your experience as an advisor to answer the questions that the students might be asking. And so that's kind of another way that we're trying to bridge the gap as well. And there's only so many people at Pershing, but we have a lot more clients too, and they have clients. And so we can kind of do a little bit, then maybe everybody else who does something loops in one or two people, and we got a pyramid scheme. It's perfect, right? Let's go.
A good pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
Financial literacy number one, pyramid schemes. Okay.
The right kind of pyramid scheme. Yeah. All pyramid schemes are bad, except for the ones where you bring in a friend to help teach financial literacy to kids.
Oh, there we go. And no money is exchanged. There we go.
And no money exchanged, right.
What else could advisors be doing, do you think?
Yeah. So when we started this partnership with Everfi, we would be talking to advisors about how we would make the school adoption program available to our clients as well. And a couple of them would say yeah, but can I white label it? And this is not advertising for you, right? This isn't the intent of the program, although you certainly can if you want to. But I think, whether we are aware of it or not, we're all involved in different communities. I've got some clients who are super plugged into the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and they do a phenomenal job too on financial literacy and bringing in members of the community to teach. My neighbor behind me does a lot of work with Junior Achievement, another fantastic organization. But even still, if you're in a city, you have rec centers. They have, you can put up a sign and invite people in and give a little seminar. If you're not comfortable teaching, there's lots of organizations that would love to take your money where there are people who want to teach. I feel like if everybody just did a little bit, we'd be in a really great spot. I think some people still look at it and go, I'm not a teacher, or like, this isn't my area. And so kind of take a step back and it's somebody else's responsibility. But I feel like if everybody just did a little bit of something and share the knowledge that they have or a lesson that they've learned, put up a LinkedIn post during Financial Literacy Month around a money lesson that you learned that might have helped you or changed your life, or, whatever it might be. Let's do something.
Do you think, in your discussions with financial advisors and others, what's the most underutilized, benefit people have or program that they might have at their disposal that they're not using, whether it's maxing out their 401k or something else? Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, actually, my little hidden gem that I love to share with new employees when they join our team is we have an HSA that's available. An HSA follows you wherever you go. And the HSA that we work with allows us to invest that money. So it used to be that it just kind of sat there like cash in a bank. But now you can set up an automatic sweep and have it invested and maintain a minimum level of cash so that if you need it, it's there. But if you have excess in that account, then it can be invested along with your other savings. And if you leave your job, you can use it to pay for healthcare related expenses, even after you're retired or not working at a company with an HSA.
I love that one. That's one that I'm trying to max out myself too, because I think when you retire, if you save the receipts that you've paid for out of pocket, then you can take out of your HSA tax free, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yep. There's all kinds of cool things you can do in an HSA. And I'm not an advisor. I've just been lucky enough to hang out with lots of good ones over the years. That's something that we've been trying to do the last few years too. And again, you watch education costs rise, healthcare costs are rising too. And that's going to come in handy for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're not financial advisors, so talk to your financial advisor about
yes.
that. But really interesting. Look into that. That's cool. Since we are a podcast about trends, and I like to ask this one question as we start to come to the close, which is, what's one long-term trend you see playing out over the next year or several years?
Yeah, so something that kind of tying back to what we do here at Pershing, and that's just where my mind goes because it's where I spend my time and where my natural energy is we talk a lot to advisors who talk about the talent shortage in the financial advice community and the desire to have a more diverse group of candidates when they're trying to hire junior talent. And I keep telling them that the solution is in the kindergarten classes of today. And if they can go in and teach kids and show them what a cool job it is to be a financial advisor, then, as they grow up and come through school, more and more students from more diverse communities are going to want to be financial advisors or work in our space. I feel like the more diversity we have in the advisory space, in our client bases, it's going to make us better as an industry and more capable to serve more people. And so I keep saying that it's going to be a trend. I want it to be a trend. I want it to happen. I think it's the long-term solution to the talent shortage. I feel like there's still a lot of kids in high school whose parents didn't have a financial advisor, don't have a financial advisor. If they did have a financial advisor, never talked about it. And so they don't even know that we're out there. And so if you're not in the classrooms, if you're not out in your communities, how do you expect to find new young talent?
Exactly.
So let's make it a trend. When we come back in 10 years, we'll check in on the trend and my kids' trust accounts, and we'll see how we do it.
Oh, sounds awesome. All right. Sounds
there you
good.
go.
As we wrap up our topic or our discussion on financial literacy, what's, one thing you want people to really just take away from our discussion today?
Yeah, do something, I think is the thing, whether it's, write a check or get out in your community. And there's so many resources out there. You don't have to write the lesson plan. You don't have to create the content. But there are schools and clubs and community groups that would love to have somebody come in and teach a couple of classes on basic financial literacy for kids or for adults or for families, whatever it might be.
Excellent. Now, when we close out our podcast, we do trend or fad. Did we tell you about that?
Yeah, I heard about it. I was so curious because they were like, well, we're not going to tell you what the questions are, so you can't prepare.
We'll see what they are, if they're any fun at all. But let's play trend or fad. I'll mention a few different concepts, and you can mention trend or fad or explain it if you'd like to, but you don't have to.
All right.
The first one is defined benefit pension plans. Trend or fad?
Trend.
Buy now, pay later plans. Trend or fad?
Oh, I really hope it's a fad.
Yeah.
Really hope it's a fad. That's like the downfall of my generation, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I could have this thing and not pay for it. Yeah, let's do this. Bad idea.
Artificial intelligence, trend or fad?
Trend. For the good though, for the good. I mean, I think like there's great benefit in it, and it's a tool to be used wisely.
Absolutely. And then lastly, the 4-day work week, trend or fad?
Ooh, both. Uh, I grew up with parents who owned a small business, and there was no such thing as a 4-day work week. It was a 7-day work week. And, I feel like we're forever connected with our devices. Um, but I think work is a less defined thing these days. I travel a lot. There might be days I'm working at midnight or at 6 a.m. or, Friday at 2 o'clock, I might just be done for the day. I feel like we're doing better recognizing when we work well and when we need to take a break. And there's going to be a place for people to do 4 days or to do 6 days and whatever feels good to them.
Those are great points. I love that. Yeah. As somebody that runs product, I always feel like I'm always on in terms of what's happening with our funds. And, but yeah, just that flexibility to check in, work when you want or need to or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But also take vacation. I'm a big believer in taking vacation and really actually unplugging. And, when I tell people we take 3 weeks every year and I take the time, it's like my SIM card comes out of my phone. You cannot reach me.
Wow.
People say, oh, how do you do that? And it's like, you know what? Pershing can survive without me for 3 weeks. I'm not that important. I am to my kids. And so I'm going to keep doing that for as long as I can get away with while they'll have me until I'm not cool anymore.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm only learning that rule now, or that lesson now, to be able to just cut free from work for at least 2 weeks. And yeah.
Americans they're tough on themselves with vacation. That's an American thing for sure. Europeans, Australians, we have no problem taking vacation. That's the one thing I can teach America is how to take a vacation.
There you go. Awesome. Well, this has been great, Lisa. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're welcome, Ed. It was great. It was a fun chat. Thanks.
And what's the best way for people to connect with you, learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of Carmen San Diego on LinkedIn. I'm kind of popping around the place and in different cities. So I'd love to see you on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you at Pershing if you want to know more about us, Pershing.com, and you can find a way to us. And if you're ever at any financial advising or industry events and I'm there, I'd love to see you. It's always nice to meet people who've heard me on a podcast or seen me on a webinar somewhere come up and say hi. So don't be shy.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully if you're ever in New York, let us know. Come by and say hi.
Yeah, we'd love to. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Trends with Benefits.